The Council's fatal decision. The Galactic Council sat in their grand chamber, a vast hall carved from the bones of an ancient space leviathan. It was the heart of the universe's most powerful alliance, a place where empires were made and destroyed with mere words. Today, those words would decide the fate of Earth. For years, the humans had been a mystery. They had joined the galactic stage late, yet they had grown too fast, too strong. Their technology advanced at an unnatural speed. Their adaptability was terrifying. They had refused to bow, refused to accept the authority of the Council. And worst of all, they had won wars they had no business winning. The Selvari ambassador, a towering figure covered in bioluminescent markings, slammed a clawed hand onto the table. This is not a debate. It is a necessity. Humanity is a disease that spreads unchecked. If we do not act now, we may not get another chance. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Even the more peaceful races had begun to fear Earth. The problem was not just their strength, it was their mindset. Unlike other species, humans didn't see war as something to be avoided at all costs. They saw it as a challenge, a puzzle to be solved. And once they committed to a fight, they would not stop until their enemy was broken. The Drazak warlord, his armored form glinting under the chamber's artificial light, leaned forward. We have the numbers. We have the technology. We strike now, and Earth falls before they even understand what's happening. The council speaker, a frail-looking Vorthian with piercing violet eyes, raised a hand for silence. Then it is decided. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room, showing the combined might of the galactic fleet. 10,000 warships, millions of soldiers, weapons capable of turning planets to dust. Against this force, Earth would have no chance. The speaker's voice rang out, sealing humanity's fate. The Galactic Council declares war on Earth. Across the stars, the message spread. Fleets were mobilized. Armies prepared for the greatest war in recorded history, on every civilized world. The news was met with relief. At last, the threat of humanity would be erased. But on Earth, there was no panic, no desperate preparations. There was only silence. The invasion fleet moved toward Earth's solar system, their warships blotting out the stars. Scouts were sent ahead to scan the system. They reported nothing. No warships waiting in ambush, no planetary shields raised in defense. No response at all. The alien commanders exchanged uneasy glances. Could it be that humanity had already accepted defeat? Had they fled their homeworld, abandoning it to the invaders? The Selvari admiral, who led the fleet, smirked. It seems the humans are finally learning their place. But then, in the depths of space, something moved. A single transmission broadcast across the system. A message from Earth. A voice, clear and calm, speaking in galactic standard. You wanted war. Now face the consequences. Then, the darkness of space came alive. And the war that the Council had started, the war they thought they had already won, truly began. The invasion fleet advanced, their warships cutting through the void like an unstoppable tide. The commanders expected a desperate defense, an outmatched human force scrambling to resist. But there was nothing. No warning shots, no distress signals, just the eerie silence of a planet that refused to acknowledge its impending doom. Admiral Xalvorin of the Selvari Dominion stood on the bridge of the flagship Obsidian Wrath, watching the distant blue sphere of Earth with narrowed eyes. They are either the most foolish species in the galaxy, he murmured, or they are planning something we cannot yet see. The fleet pushed forward, crossing the outer limits of the solar system. Still, no response. A species facing extinction should have been screaming for mercy, yet Earth had not sent a single plea. The Galactic Council had waged wars before, crushed defiant civilizations, reduced rebellious homeworlds to ashes. But never before had they encountered this kind of silence. The Admiral ordered long-range scans. The results were baffling. Earth's orbital defenses were minimal, No planetary shields, no battle stations, only a few outdated satellites drifting in space. Their fleet, if they even had one, was nowhere to be found. The report made him pause. It was too easy, too quiet. Commander Drazek of the Drazek Imperium scoffed as he reviewed the data. They are broken before the battle has begun. Perhaps they have accepted their fate. Zalvorin was not so sure. He had seen human war records, stories of impossible victories, of outnumbered forces surviving where they should have been wiped out. There was something unnatural about their refusal to submit. Yet nothing they had here suggested a fight. The fleet approached the asteroid belt, moving with precision through the scattered debris. Then, without warning, something changed. The navigation systems flickered. Communications stuttered. Star maps became unreadable. The entire fleet's sensor array was blind. Then came the first explosion. A battleship at the fleet's rear suddenly detonated, torn apart as if by an invisible force. Before the fleet could react, another ship erupted into flames, its engines flickering before going dark. Panic spread through the command channels. There were no visible attackers, no energy signatures, no incoming projectiles, just destruction. The fleet moved into formation, scanning every direction, but the enemy remained unseen. Only wreckage and confusion filled the void. Then the first message from Earth came. It was a simple text, appearing on every ship's interface at once. You are not the hunters. You are the prey. In that instant, the war they thought would be easy turned into a nightmare. The Selvari war fleet drifted in the darkness, confusion spreading like wildfire. Admiral Zalvorin clenched his mandibles as he stared at the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. Something was hunting them. Something unseen, something deadly. Find them, he roared, his voice echoing through the command deck. Full spectrum scans. I want to know what's attacking us. The officers scrambled, their claws tapping frantically against control panels, but the results remained the same. No enemy ships detected, no projectiles, no weapons fire, just silent, ruthless destruction. The first wave of panic spread through the fleet. Some commanders assumed it was a cloaked enemy force. Others whispered about human trickery, a psychological attack designed to make them hesitate. But the truth was far worse. Another ship exploded, a Selvari battlecruiser, its hull suddenly ripped apart as if by an invisible force. The destruction was brutal and immediate, like a predator striking down prey with a single swipe. The burning wreckage floated into the void, adding to the growing graveyard of ships. Commander Drazek's voice crackled through the fleet-wide channel, his tone desperate. Admiral, we need to fall back. We are fighting ghosts. Zalvorin's claws dug into his command chair. He would not retreat, not against an enemy they had yet to see. Deploy fighter squadrons, he ordered. Scan for any distortion, any anomaly. Find them now. Hundreds of fighter craft launched from the remaining ships, darting out into the darkness. They spread through the void in search patterns, scanning, analyzing, waiting for something, anything, to reveal itself. Then the second message arrived. It came as a low, distorted transmission, playing on every screen, every comm channel in the fleet. A human voice. Calm, controlled, unshaken. You were warned. Zalvorin's blood turned to ice. He had seen human warfare before. He had read the battle reports of how they fought. They did not fight for glory like the Selvari. They did not fight for honor like the Drazek Imperium. They fought to win. Before he could process the words, a new horror unfolded. The fighters, hundreds of them, vanished. No explosions, no distress calls, no sign of battle. One moment, the scanner showed them spread out in formation. The next, nothing. As if they had never existed. The fleet channels erupted into panic. What happened to them? Did they cloak? Were they pulled into a black hole? There's nothing out there. There's nothing out. Silence. The ship sending the transmission was gone. Zalvorin's mandibles twitched. His forces had fought countless battles across the stars. They had conquered entire species, yet nothing had prepared them for this. The enemy was not fighting them. The enemy was hunting them. Reverse course, he commanded, his voice sharp. Fall back to the edge of the system. We need to regroup. The remaining ships turned, engines roaring to life as they prepared to retreat. But then, the trap was sprung. From the darkness, Earth's counterattack began. Silent missiles, cloaked in advanced stealth technology, erupted from the asteroid belt. They slipped through shields undetected, detonating with pinpoint precision. Explosions rippled through the fleet, tearing ships apart before they could react. Exalvoran watched in horror as his forces fell like insects before a storm. And then the humans revealed themselves. At the edge of the battlefield, emerging from behind the drifting asteroid field, came the first human warships. They were unlike anything the fleet had ever encountered. Jet-black hulls that reflected no light. Engines that emitted no standard energy signatures. Predators built for war. And at the front, a single massive battleship. A ship that should not exist. A ship that was not on any Galactic Council records. Its name burned across its hull in bold human script. SS Nemesis. It was then that Exalvoran understood. The humans had never been defenseless. They had simply been waiting. And now, the galaxy was about to learn the full meaning of their mistake. Admiral Exalvoran's mandibles twitched as he watched his fleet collapse into chaos. The HSS Nemesis loomed ahead, its dark hull reflecting nothing, as if it were absorbing the very light around it. The battlefield had turned into a graveyard. Hundreds of Selvari warships, gone. No bodies, no debris, just eerie silence. "This is impossible," whispered Commander Drazik, his voice barely above a tremble. His scales had paled, a clear sign of fear among their species. Exalvoran wanted to deny it, wanted to believe this was just another battle, one that could still be won. But deep inside, something cold settled in his chest. This was not war. This was execution. A sharp beeping sound rang across the bridge. An urgent transmission. A grainy video feed flickered onto the screen. A human stood before them. He was clad in a sleek black uniform. No rank insignia, no symbols of allegiance. His eyes were calm, piercing, predatory. He tilted his head slightly, analyzing them like a scientist would a failed experiment. "Admiral Exalvoran," the human's voice was steady, emotionless. "We've been expecting you." The Selvari leader bared his fangs. "Who are you?" The human's lips curled slightly. A smirk. "That's not important. What is important is that you understand. There is no escape." As if on cue, new readings flooded the scanners. More human warships uncloaking. Dozens. No, hundreds. The Galactic Council had always believed Earth was weak, that humanity lacked the numbers, the technology, the ruthlessness to stand against an empire like the Selvari. But as these ships appeared, their energy readings beyond anything known, it became clear. Humanity had never been outmatched. They had simply been waiting for the right moment. Exalvoran's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. His instincts screamed at him to flee. But where? The moment they entered warp, these ships could track them. He could already tell. These humans fought like hunters, not soldiers. They would never let their prey escape. "We had no choice," Exalvoran growled, forcing himself to speak. "We followed the Council's orders. Earth refused to join. That made you a threat." The human on the screen exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "And so, you chose war. Now you'll understand why that was a mistake." A silent command passed through the human fleet, and the slaughter began. The trap was closing. The Selvari warships tried to rally, their formations tightening as they fired desperately at the advancing human fleet. But the humans didn't fight like any known species. Their ships moved like shadows, twisting and weaving in ways that defied standard propulsion physics. They blinked in and out of sensor readings, vanishing between reality and something unknown. The first wave of human fighters struck. Unlike Selvari drone ships, which relied on overwhelming numbers, the human fighters were small, fast, and precise. Each one danced through the battlefield like a predator striking from the dark. They weren't just aiming for the Selvari ship's weapons or engines. They were surgical. They targeted command bridges, reactor cores, critical life support systems. They weren't here to disable. They were here to eradicate. Zalvoran's heart pounded as he saw his officers die in real time. The fleet's remaining ships screamed out distress calls, begging for reinforcements from the wider empire. No response. Some ships tried to retreat, only to vanish the moment they activated their warp drives. The humans had predicted that move. They had set up interdiction fields, cutting off any chance of escape. Zalvoran felt something unfamiliar creeping into his chest. Fear. They had invaded Earth expecting a fight, but they had never imagined this. "Sir," Drazek whispered, his voice broken. We cannot win this." Zalvoran's mind raced. He could order a final charge. He could attempt to destroy at least one human ship before they all died. But deep down he knew. This battle had never been fair. Humanity had let them believe they were strong. They had let the Council think Earth was a backwater world with no real power. But that was the real trick. The moment the galaxy declared war on Earth, the humans stopped pretending. Zalvoran took a slow breath. He turned back to the human on the screen, who was still watching him. Not gloating, not laughing, just waiting. That Selvari Admiral's voice was hoarse. What do you want?" The human didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of inevitability settle in. Then, at last, he spoke. "I want you to understand," the human said, voice quiet but firm. "This was never a war." His expression darkened. This was a warning. And with that, the HSS Nemesis unleashed its final attack. The bridge of Zalvoran's flagship, the Dreadfang, was in chaos. Officers barked orders, screens flickered with damage reports, and alarms howled through the corridors. The Selvari fleet was crumbling. Not losing, crumbling. Their warships, once the pride of their empire, were being systematically erased from existence, not shattered into debris, not left drifting and disabled. Erased. The human warships didn't just fire weapons. They rewrote the battlefield. Ships disappeared mid-maneuver, blinking out of existence, as if reality itself had decided they no longer belonged. Others were struck by weapons unlike anything in the known galaxy, dark spears of energy that bypassed shields and armor alike, reducing entire vessels to drifting husks. Zalvoran gripped the edge of his command throne, his claws digging deep into the metal. This wasn't war. This was punishment. The fleet was breaking. Some Selvari captains abandoned their posts, their vessels vanishing into warp space in desperate attempts to flee. But the moment they jumped, their signals went dark. No explosions, no distress calls, just silence. The humans had accounted for that. They had set up some kind of interdiction field beyond the limits of known technology. It didn't just stop ships from warping away. It devoured them. One officer, trembling, turned to Zalvoran. "Yes, sir, we must surrender." Zalvoran's mandibles clenched tight. The Selvari Empire did not surrender. "Open fire," he snarled. The remaining warships obeyed. A desperate, final barrage. Green energy lanced toward the human fleet, their largest weapons firing at full power. Planet busters, anti-capital ship cannons, everything. For a brief second, hope flickered in Zalvoran's chest. Then the human ships vanished. Every single one of them. Not dodging, not maneuvering, just gone. His blood turned to ice. He had only 1 second to process this before the humans reappeared, right behind his remaining forces. And then the true slaughter began. The Nemesis led the charge. The human warship, impossibly fast for its size, ripped through the Xelvari lines like a ghost. It didn't move like a machine. It hunted. Its cannons fired in perfect synchronization, taking out bridge after bridge, reactor after reactor. Every shot was deliberate, precise. The Nemesis wasn't fighting to claim territory. It was erasing the Xelvari fleet from existence. Zalvoran's remaining ships scrambled, firing wildly, but it made no difference. The humans didn't flinch. They had already won. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Captain Elias Kane watched the slaughter unfold. His crew moved with cold precision. No celebration, no arrogance, just efficiency. Kane had seen war before. He had fought in the shadows, taken part in battles the rest of humanity would never hear about. But this wasn't a battle. This was a lesson. He tapped the control panel on his command chair. The screen flickered, and the face of Admiral Zalvoran appeared, desperation written across his features. Kane leaned forward. His voice was calm, almost emotionless. "Now you understand." Zalvoran's mandibles twitched. He looked like a trapped animal, eyes darting as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. Kane continued, his voice low and measured. "We gave you warnings. We let you back away. You refused. You thought humanity was weak." Zalvoran swallowed. His voice was hoarse. We didn't know." Kane's gaze hardened. "You do now." Silence stretched between them. Zalvoran trembled. He wasn't thinking about victory anymore. He wasn't even thinking about survival. He was thinking about what came next. His voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want?" Kane let the question hang in the air. Then, finally, he spoke. "We want you to remember." Zalvoran flinched. Kane's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "We want the galaxy to remember." And with that, the Nemesis opened fire one last time. The Xelvari homeworld, Zorvac Prime, had never known war. For centuries, their empire had crushed lesser species before any threat could reach their core worlds. Their fleets had always been their shield, their power absolute. But now, that shield was gone. And the Nemesis was here. Panic consumed the capital. Sirens howled across the sprawling cityscape of Zorvac Prime. Civilians ran in all directions, scrambling toward underground shelters that wouldn't save them. The sky, once a deep shade of violet, was now shattered by fire. The wreckage of their mighty fleets rained down like falling stars. Xelvari soldiers, once proud warriors, trembled as they watched the destruction unfold from their homeworld. The humans hadn't even fired on the planet yet. But they were here. And that Xelvari knew what came next. The Nemesis didn't attack immediately. It loomed above the capital, its shadow stretching for miles, a silent executioner. In the heart of the government citadel, Supreme Chancellor Vakor stood frozen. His advisors surrounded him, arguing, screaming, for a plan, a strategy, a way out. There must be a diplomatic channel. Humanity doesn't negotiate. We should launch planetary defenses and give them an excuse to destroy us. Every voice faltered under the weight of the truth. They had already lost. A single transmission came through. The Xelvari leaders gathered in front of the central holo display, their faces pale. The screen flickered, and once again, Captain Elias Kane appeared. No threats, no demands, just cold, quiet authority. "You declared war on Earth," Kane said. His voice echoed through every Xelvari broadcast, every screen, every comm line. "You slaughtered our people. You ignored our warnings. You thought you were invincible." The Chancellor opened his mouth, but Kane's eyes flashed with something far worse than rage. Indifference. "We could have ended this long ago," Kane continued. "We could have erased you from existence with a single command, but that would be too easy." He leaned forward. "Instead, we wanted you to see, to understand." Chancellor Vakor felt something deep in his bones, a realization colder than space itself. The humans weren't just destroying the Selvari Empire. They were making an example of it. The first wave of destruction was precise. The Nemesis did not fire on the planet's cities. Not yet. Instead, it targeted key infrastructure. Power grids, orbital docks, planetary defense stations, erased with pinpoint accuracy. The mighty Selvari homeworld, the heart of an empire that had ruled for centuries, was now helpless. Their once great fleets, gone. Their mighty armies, useless. For the first time in history, Zorvac Prime was vulnerable. And the humans let them feel it. Then the real horror began. The Nemesis deployed blackout drones, shutting down all external communications. The Selvari couldn't call for help. Not that it mattered. No one would come. Every species that once feared the Selvari was watching. Every race that had once cowered beneath their rule now saw the consequences of challenging humanity. And not one of them dared to interfere. Chancellor Vakor fell to his knees. This wasn't just the end of the war. This was the end of the Selvari themselves. His voice shook as he whispered, "What? What do you want from us?" The holo screen flickered. Kane's face remained stone-cold, unreadable. And then, finally, he spoke. "We want you to live." The room went silent. Kane's voice dropped to a whisper. "We want you to remember." And with those final words, the Nemesis turned its cannons toward the skyline of Zorvac Prime. And fired. The sky burned. From the highest towers of the Selvari capital to the lowest underground shelters, every living being saw it. The mighty government citadel, the very heart of their empire, was gone in a single blast. Not reduced to rubble. Not shattered into pieces. Erased. Where once stood a symbol of Selvari power, now there was nothing but a crater. And then, silence. A silence more terrifying than war. A silence that stretched across the entire planet, across every remaining Selvari world, and across the entire galaxy. Because the war was over, and Earth had won. The Nemesis did not finish them off. No orbital bombardment. No planetary cleansing. Humanity had the power to wipe them out completely, but they chose not to. And that was what made it so much worse. Because extinction is mercy. But what the humans left behind, that was a lesson. Survivors wandered the ruins of their once mighty cities. Without power, without leadership, without fleets, the Selvari Empire was no more. But the humans had ensured their survival. Water stations were left untouched. Agricultural zones were spared. Medical centers, while damaged, remained functional. It was as if Earth had wanted them to live, to suffer, to remember. Because no matter how many centuries passed, every Selvari child, every descendant, every new generation would be taught one thing above all else: the consequence of declaring war on Earth. The message spread. The downfall of the Selvari wasn't just a military defeat. It was a warning. Across the stars, the footage of Zorvac Prime's fall spread like wildfire. It played in the war councils of 1,000 species. It was whispered in the shadows of backwater worlds. It was recorded in history archives across the galaxy. The same words, spoken again and again in 100 different languages. Never challenge Earth. Never provoke humanity. Because they don't just defeat their enemies. They make sure no one forgets. A final transmission. As the Nemesis prepared to leave, the last transmission from Earth played one final time across what remained of the Selvari networks. The voice of Captain Elias Kane, calm, steady, and unforgiving. "This war is over." The words echoed across every surviving Selvari city. "We will not return. We will not interfere. You will rebuild, but you will do so knowing what you lost." There was a pause. And then, "You wanted war." The sound of deep, rumbling engines vibrated through the shattered cities. "Now you've learned the consequences." And with that, Nemesis vanished into the void. The war was over. but its lesson would never be forgotten.